Welcome to Broken Hearts of Reddit. Get ready to hear a story of betrayal that will chill you to the bone. This is a story about how, the day before my wedding, my fiancée cheated on me with my brother, and how, the next day, I showed a video of it to the entire wedding party. But sitting here now, in an empty apartment, I realize it all started much earlier. I just didn't want to see it. I still remember that day. The sun filled the living room with a soft, golden light. Maggie, my Maggie, was laughing, sitting on the floor surrounded by scattered photographs. We were choosing pictures for our wedding slideshow. Pictures of our life together. Our journey that began with an awkward introduction in a university library and led us here, to the threshold of a shared life. I looked at her sea-green eyes, at the strand of blonde hair falling on her cheek, and thought I was the luckiest man on earth. We were the perfect couple. Everyone said so. I, a successful architect, she, a talented artist. We complemented each other like two parts of a whole. Our life was like a meticulously built house, where every detail was in its place, creating harmony and comfort. Evenings spent discussing the future layout of our home, morning runs in the park, quiet candlelit dinners. All of it seemed like an unshakable foundation for our happiness. I loved watching her when she painted. Her focused gaze, the smooth movements of her brush, the way she would bite her lip as she added the final touches. She was painting our dreams, our future. One of the canvases depicted the house I had designed. On another, it was us, standing on a seashore with a crimson sunset on the horizon. She always said her paintings were a reflection of her soul, and I believed that soul belonged entirely to me. Our house was filled with her work, each piece permeated with love and warmth. I proudly showed them to my friends and colleagues. I loved how she would get shy, but a sense of pride was visible in her eyes. My brother, Ben, was my best friend. He was 2 years younger than me, but we had always been inseparable. We went through all our childhood adventures together, supported each other through teenage troubles, and now shared the joys and sorrows of adult life. He was the best man at my wedding. We often spent evenings together, the three of us, laughing, reminiscing, and making plans for the future. Maggie loved Ben, and he loved her. At least, that's what I thought. I liked that they got along. It made my life even more complete and happy. They often talked, discussing art and music, and I saw it only as confirmation that the people I loved most had found common ground. But for some time, something had changed. It was barely perceptible, like a faint breeze you don't know where it's coming from. Maggie became more pensive. Sometimes, I would find her frozen in the middle of the room, staring into nothing. When I asked what she was thinking about, she would just smile and say she was lost in her work on a new painting. Her smile was as beautiful as ever, but it lacked the spark I was used to. It became like a beautiful mask, hiding something strange and unfamiliar. She started staying late in her studio. Before, she would often call me in, show me what she was working on, and we would talk for hours while she created. Now, the door was closed, and she would ask me not to enter, saying she needed to focus. I respected her creative process, but the feeling that something was gone settled in me. I missed our closeness, our conversations. I tried to convince myself it was just pre-wedding stress, that she was worried and needed more personal space. But somewhere deep inside me, a small crack began to grow. I remember one evening I caught her in the studio when she thought I was asleep. She was sitting by the window gazing into the darkness, her face lit by the dim light of a street lamp. I didn't see the joy and anticipation a bride should have just a few days before her wedding. Her face was pale and tense, and in her eyes I saw something that made my heart clench with an inexplicable pain. It was like sadness, but not the kind you can share. It was a deep longing, as if her soul wasn't here, but somewhere far away. I didn't ask her anything. I just went back to bed, pretending to be asleep, but I couldn't sleep anymore. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, and felt that small crack inside me becoming deeper. I couldn't explain what was bothering me. It was just a feeling. The feeling that something was wrong, that in our perfect, meticulously built house, a crack had appeared, through which a cold, foreign air was seeping in. This crack began to widen. Not rapidly, but slowly, like a spiderweb on an old window, becoming more noticeable with each passing day. Small, seemingly insignificant things that, in total, began to form something unsettling. Maggie started to forget. Unimportant things, I thought then. She might forget we agreed to go to the movies, or that we had dinner with my parents. Before, she was the epitome of organization. Her calendar was booked months in advance. Now she seemed distracted, as if her thoughts were far away, and it was difficult for her to return to reality. I attributed it to wedding preparations, to stress. But in her eyes, there was no bride's worry, but some strange detachment. I started to notice she was avoiding physical contact. She used to always hold my hand when we walked. Now, if I tried to take her hand, it felt tense, as if she wanted to slip away. Kisses became fleeting, and hugs were short and lifeless. I felt an invisible wall growing between us, and I didn't know how to tear it down. One evening, when I came home from work, Maggie wasn't there. A note on the kitchen table read, "Went to my parents, will be back tomorrow morning. Don't worry, love, Maggie." I was surprised. She had never left without warning before. I called her, but her phone was off. I started to worry. I called her mom. After a long pause, she said Maggie hadn't been there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, staring into the darkness, and the small crack inside me turned into a huge chasm I didn't know how to avoid falling into. In the morning, just as I was about to call the police, she appeared. She walked in, as if nothing had happened, with a fleeting smile. I asked her where she had been. She said she decided to go to a friend's place to discuss wedding dresses and forgot to tell me. I didn't believe her. I saw the lie in her eyes. Her clothes were wrinkled, and in her hair I noticed a tiny twig, as if she hadn't spent the night in a warm bed, but somewhere outside. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, trying to understand who this woman was standing in front of me. She was my Maggie, and yet she wasn't. I started to watch her, not openly, but so she wouldn't notice. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. My jealousy and suspicion grew like a wild weed. I started paying attention to Ben. He had changed too. He became more withdrawn, avoiding my eyes. When we were together, the three of us, there was a strange tension between them that I hadn't noticed before. Their glances would meet for a fraction of a second, and then they would both look away, as if they were afraid I would see something. One evening, when Ben and I were playing poker, I noticed a small scratch on his hand. The kind you get from a twig. I had seen the exact same one on Maggie's hand. I didn't say anything. I just looked at their hands, and a puzzle I didn't want to assemble began to form in my mind. The wedding was approaching. I felt like a taut string, ready to snap at any moment, but I continued to pretend that everything was fine. I smiled when Maggie talked about our future children. I pretended not to notice her detachment. I was building a house that was already starting to crumble. On the eve of the wedding, we had a dinner with our parents and friends. Everyone was cheerful and happy, anticipating the celebration. Only I felt alone and empty. I watched Maggie and Ben. They sat next to each other, talking about something. I noticed her fingertips trace his hand. It was so fast, so subtle, that no one but me would have seen it. But I did, and in that moment, I understood. My whole life, everything I had built, was a lie. All this time, while I thought we were together, she was with him, my brother. I felt the world around me collapse. The guests, the parents, the laughter, it all became unimportant. I looked at them, at their faces, and saw only betrayal. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up from the table, said I needed some air, and left. I walked through the city at night, not knowing where I was going. I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I didn't want to believe. I couldn't believe that the two people closest to me could do this. The next 24 hours were the longest and most tormenting time of my life. I returned home only in the morning. Maggie was sleeping, curled up like a child. I stood over her, looking at her face, and felt hatred battling with love. Fragments of memories swirled in my head, now taking on a completely different meaning. All their accidental meetings, the long conversations that stopped when I walked into the room, their jokes that only the two of them understood. Her creative crises when she locked herself in the studio and didn't want to be disturbed. And his, Ben's, strange behavior, his awkward attempts to avoid my gaze. None of it was a coincidence. It was a carefully planned performance where I was the main character, unaware of my role. I couldn't sleep. My mind was in complete chaos. I didn't know what to do. I could have made a scene right then. Woke her up, thrown all my suspicions in her face, seen her scared, lying expression. But that would be too simple. I didn't just want a scene. I wanted the truth. I wanted to know everything. How long had this been going on? Why? I wanted them to pay for their lies. My hands trembled with anger. I decided I needed proof. Not just suspicions, but something undeniable. Something that would force them to confess, that would leave them no chance. I frantically started to recall all their strange actions. I remembered Maggie once saying she had lost her favorite flash drive with her sketches. She was very upset. I hadn't thought much of it then. But now I suddenly understood. I knew where she kept such things. I went to her studio. The door was ajar. I walked in, and my heart began to pound wildly. On her desk, I saw a folder. Inside were drawings, not the ones she had shown me. These were drawings of Ben, his profile, his hands, his smile. They were made with such love and tenderness that my throat tightened. In one of the drawings, they were together. He was hugging her, and she was leaning against him. On the back, I saw an inscription, "Our secret." I felt sick. But that wasn't all. In the corner of the room, I saw an old camera. We had bought it a few years ago, but barely used it. It suddenly occurred to me that I should check it. My hands were shaking so much, I could barely turn it on. I scrolled through a few videos of our parties and old family gatherings, and then I came across something completely different. It was a video taken yesterday. The recording was made in some old house. I immediately recognized the place. It was an abandoned lakeside cabin that had once belonged to my grandfather. It was far from the city, and no one ever went there. They were in the video, Maggie and Ben. I saw them laughing, hugging, kissing. I watched it, and a numbness came over me. I didn't feel pain. I didn't feel anything. I was looking at them as if they were strangers. I saw my fiancée and my brother betraying me, and I couldn't move. When the video ended, I sat in the darkness, and my mind was completely blank. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat there, and an icy silence settled in my soul. I knew I had to act, but I couldn't just lash out. That would be too merciful. I wanted them to feel what I was feeling. I wanted them to see their world crumble, just as mine was. And then a plan was born in my mind. A plan filled with pain, vengeance, and despair. A plan that would destroy them, and perhaps myself as well. The wedding day. The sun, which had seemed golden and gentle just yesterday, shone cold and mercilessly today. I looked at myself in the mirror. The suit fit perfectly, but inside I was shattered into 1,000 pieces. My face wore a mask, carefully crafted and rehearsed, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The happy groom, who was supposed to be entering a new life, was actually preparing for his death. Maggie was beautiful. The white dress, the delicate veil, the eyes that were once full of love, now held only a flutter of what seemed to me like fear. She looked at me, and in her gaze, I saw a plea for forgiveness, or a plea for me not to know. I couldn't understand. I just nodded at her and pulled the widest of my fake smiles onto my face. She exhaled with relief. I saw it. I thought about Ben. He stood next to me, my best man. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the same thing, a mix of fear and hope that I knew nothing. His hand rested on my shoulder. I felt its weight, as if he was pressing down on me with all his betrayal. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him, and only one thought circled in my mind. You betrayed me. You betrayed my love. You betrayed our friendship. During the ceremony, when the priest spoke of love, loyalty, and trust, I wanted to scream. I looked at Maggie, who was vowing eternal love to me, and felt fury overwhelming me. My heart was pounding in a frantic rhythm, and only one voice echoed in my head. A lie. It's all a lie. After the ceremony, we went to the reception. The atmosphere was incredible. Everyone was laughing, dancing, and congratulating us. My parents, her parents, our friends, everyone was happy. And only I, standing in the center of this celebration, felt utterly alone. I waited for the moment when all the guests were seated at the tables. Time for toasts and congratulations. My father gave a touching speech about how happy he was for us. Maggie's mother, tearfully, spoke about how wonderful and kind she was. And then it was Ben's turn. He stood up, holding a glass. He was smiling, but I could see his lips trembling. My brother, my beloved Maggie, I am so happy for you both. I know you will be the happiest couple in the world, he said. He raised his glass, and in that moment, I felt the fury I had held back for so long erupt. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, took the microphone, and said, "Thank you, Ben. You're right. We will be the happiest couple in the world. But I want to show everyone something, so you can all understand how much we love each other." Maggie looked at me with confusion. Ben froze. I walked over to the projector, which was supposed to show our wedding slideshow, and plugged in my flash drive. I pressed the play button. At first, everyone saw me and Maggie. Our happy faces, our hugs, our smiles. The guests gasped. And then I changed the video. The abandoned lakeside cabin appeared on the screen, and then them. Maggie and Ben. At first, they were laughing. Then they were hugging. Then they were kissing. I heard a deafening silence fall over the hall. I saw Maggie jump up from her seat, her face as white as a sheet. Ben stood like a statue, his eyes wide with horror. I saw their parents looking at them as if they didn't recognize them. I saw shock, despair, and pain. And in that moment, I realized that revenge is not a sweet dish. It is a bitter medicine that kills not only the enemy, but also yourself. The silence was deafening. It hung in the air, heavy as a stone, and I felt it pressing down on me. I looked at the faces of the guests who, just a minute ago, had been laughing and celebrating. Now, their faces held only horror. My father clutched his heart, and Maggie's mother covered her face with her hands. Ben stood, pale, and Maggie looked at me, and in her eyes I saw not only fear, but something even worse. Understanding. She understood that I knew, that I had been playing a part all this time, that I had been preparing this revenge. "Why?" she whispered, her voice a croak. "I wanted you to understand the pain I felt," I said. My voice was calm, and I was surprised myself where it came from. "I wanted you to feel what it's like to be betrayed, to be deceived by the two people closest to you." I took off my jacket, and then my shirt, and stood before everyone in just a t-shirt with a picture of Maggie and me on it. I looked at her eyes, which were now filled with tears, and then I turned to Ben. He stood with his head down, as if awaiting execution. "You are my brother," I said, and my voice trembled. "I loved you. I trusted you. I thought we were forever." I walked over to the table, picked up a bottle of champagne, and smashed it on the floor. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound was as sharp as the pain in my heart. "This is what you did to my life," I said, looking them in the eyes. "You shattered it into 1,000 pieces that I will never be able to put back together." I turned and walked to the exit without looking back. I heard screams, sobs. I heard someone trying to stop me, but I couldn't stay there anymore. I went outside, and the cold wind hit my face. It brought no relief. I walked through the city, not knowing where I was going. My revenge was a success. I had destroyed their lives, but I felt no satisfaction. I felt only emptiness. I came back to our home, the house we had built together. I walked inside, and everything I saw reminded me of her. Her paintings, her things, her scent. I couldn't stay there anymore. I gathered all of her belongings into one box and carried it outside. I put it on the curb with the trash, and then I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and for the first time in a long time, I cried. I wasn't crying out of self-pity or out of anger. I was crying for what I had lost. I had lost more than a fiancé. I had lost a brother, a friend, a person I trusted. I had lost everything. The next day, I left. I took nothing with me but this story and the pain. I went to a place where no one knew me, where there was no past. I started a new life. But the crack that had once appeared in my heart remained. I know it will never heal. I know I will always remember the day I destroyed my life to get revenge on those who destroyed it first.